Good morning. I'm Larry Vines. I'm the Territory Vice President of Human Resources with Kohl's Department Stores, and I have the pleasure of introducing Craig Phillipson, who's the founder and CEO of ShopWorks. It's a company that operates from 9 offices worldwide and boasts a significant client base of international blue-chip companies. Since founding ShopWorks in UK in 1997, Craig has led the company through a period of major international growth. He has overall responsibility for ShopWorks worldwide and leads the strategic direction and development of the company. He is also actively involved in the delivery of consultancy and design projects reflecting ShopWorks' hands-on approach to business. Please join me in welcoming Craig to the stage.
That was perfect. Thank you. Good morning, and I'd like to start by saying it's a great honor to be here. My first time in Arizona, and hopefully not my last, with the beautiful views and all the rest of it. So, has everybody had a good coffee break? All feeling good? Probably none of you as nervous as I am. I spoke to my business partner, João, who's a Portuguese guy just now. And I said, João, I've got a bit of a problem. I'm about to present to a room full of people who probably know more than I do. He said, Craig, I can tell you 2 things. One is you're probably right. And secondly, there's nothing I can do to help. I think these are the partners we all need. He often starts by telling a story about Zaza Gabor, the Hungarian actress who later came to Hollywood. And Zaza had 7 husbands, which I think is fantastic. I think certainly to be admired in a woman, perhaps not recommended in a wife, but nevertheless, 7 husbands. And her 7th husband on their wedding night turned to her and said, Zaza, I know what I've got to do, but can I make it interesting? And I think that's where I find myself now. I know what I've got to do, but can I make it interesting? We're lucky enough to work in lots of different places. We're based primarily in London. João, my partner's down in Lisbon. He looks after Madrid as well. We've got 2 guys who were our original partners out in Melbourne with an office in Sydney. We're in Moscow, Mumbai, Stockholm. Well, Stockholm's an agency, and Frederick has never sold anything. But he's still on the slide because we like him. Colombo, which is run out of Mumbai, Shanghai, and in the process of starting in New York. And what that means is we're very lucky to go around talking to retailers and manufacturers and service providers and talking to them about what it means to be in shops. And the great thing about lots of people who are in shops is that they got into it completely by accident. And you say to them, why have you got shops? And they go, well, I needed to sell something, and I needed somewhere to sell it from. And that's often the starting point for retail. And for the last 10 years, we've had a great time going to some very, very interesting places. We were one of the first agencies into Moscow, which was it was quite hairy 10 years ago. We used to be collected by a bulletproof Hummer and escorted around the place. And in fact, it was quite funny. The guy that we worked for there, Maxime, he has, I think, now 1,500 mobile phone stores. And the whole relationship started when he called me and he said, Craig, this is Maxime from Moscow. You come, I pay. So I thought, it's a good enough start. So off I went. We got there, and the first place he took me was Red Square. And he pointed at St. Basil's Cathedral, which is the kind of onion-topped cathedral at the edge of Red Square. So, Craig, I'm going to tell you a story about Red Square. It was commissioned by Ivan the Terrible from a young architect, and the young architect built it. And at the end, Ivan the Terrible turned to the architect and said to the architect, will this be the greatest piece that you ever create? And the architect looked at Ivan and said, Ivan, with your patronage, this is just the start of bigger and greater things. Ivan the Terrible took out his dagger and he stabbed out the eyes of the architect. And he said, now it will be the greatest thing that you ever create. So I'm standing in Red Square, it's snowing. I'm a little bit nervous, it's a long way from home. Maxime turns to me and says, "So Craig, be careful what you say when shop is finished." So I'm still here, so he must have liked it slightly. Now, after those 10 years, about 3 months before Christmas, the shutters came down. The global economy seemed to take a bit of a turn for the worse, which I'm sure anybody here who's in any business at all will know. And it's turned out to be quite, miserable. Winston Churchill was a lot more eloquent, but miserable would be the word to describe it. And a lot of the retailers, even in India, where we do a reasonable amount, those guys are predicting 1.3 billion people, and they're predicting 6% growth. And they're still miserable. They're still worried about what's going on everywhere else. They're still reining back. Big groups, Future Retail, Pantaloon Group, they're not saying anymore we're going to have 5,000 stores in the year. What they're saying is, maybe we'll just have a look at what we've got now. In Moscow, businesses, I think only 2 weeks ago, one consumer electronics business, 800 stores, just closed the doors. And then called to say, "Bad news, Craig, the doors are closed." So it's not very good. And I think I can sum up the feeling pretty much with that one, which was taken in the city of London. But there is good news. You know, for the first time, I think, in the last couple of weeks, the phone has started to go again. People have started to look at what they've got and started to say, okay, what can we do now to really start to make a difference? So they've sat at their desks and they've said, well, look, we can't sit on our hands all year. We better do something. And so what we've gone back to a lot of these companies with is to say, look, let's not be too sophisticated, which suits me. It doesn't suit a lot of my smart guys, but it suits me. Let's not be too sophisticated. Let's go right back to the retail basics, and let's start to do simple things right that will start to drive sales from the customers that you still have. And from that point, we can start to move forward. So what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to give you a little bit about Shopworks. I'm going to talk about the key principles that we work to, that I would think every single person in this room knows what those key principles are. So what this is, it's a refresher, because it's what we're saying to some very big businesses. And they're kind of saying, okay, let's get back to that. Let's start to communicate with the store staff again and start to make changes in store, and simple changes. Because as soon as you start to make changes in store, the staff start to get enthusiastic again, stuff starts to happen, sales start to go up, and you can start to generate a bit of interest. The only thing that we know we can't do is do nothing. So, a little bit about us. What do? Well, we do market, store, and consumer research, category management and space planning, retail concept and communication design, and then implementation, training, and store audit. And the interesting thing about the graph is that the closer you have to get to the mucky bit, which is the shop fitting, the lower your margin is. So you start with the glorious stuff that you charge lots for, and by the time you're actually putting up the slat wall, you're probably losing money. But nevertheless, we offer an integrated approach, and the key for us is the integration between the research and the retail design and the floor planning. Because too often, and we're going to focus today a little bit on floor planning, too often floor planning is the kind of forgotten, unloved son of architecture and design. Because no one teaches it to anyone. You speak to some very good designers and say, what can you tell me about traffic and customer flow? And they say, do you like the pink or the green? You say, well, that wasn't quite my question. And so, what texture finish do you want on the back wall? You say, no, what's going to happen with your floor plan when customers start coming in the store? And they're never certain. Architects are a little bit the same. So it's about integrating what you understand from the research and then applying it in a practical, physical way. So we've been lucky enough to work for lots of people here and there who have taken us to lots of different countries. And what we've learned in our different countries is that 80% of what we talk about and what we do is the same almost everywhere. But the 20% is the bit that actually changes. In Germany, for example, anybody here worked in Germany? Germans are the meanest people in the world. They are so mean. You can't get money out of them for love or squeezing stones and all the rest of it. German retailers operate on tiny, tiny, tiny margins, which is what Walmart found when they went there. That there are other issues there with the partner and some of the other stuff. But Germany, if you haven't got your price positioning right before you start, you're going nowhere. In the Middle East, transaction time in telephones in the UK to get a new contract is about 45 minutes. Transaction time in the Middle East to sign up for a new contract for a telephone is about an hour and a half. Just by the very nature of the way those guys do business. They want to sit down, they want to have a coffee, they want to be entertained before they part with any money. So those kind of things, wherever you are, you've got to start putting into your design plans. But really, the essence of the 80% applies everywhere. So what are the key principles? What are the key principles? Well, the first one is that shopping is a contact sport. There's no denying it. You've got to get involved in the merchandise, you've got to get involved in the staff, and the customers have got to get involved in the whole experience. Everybody here who's involved in retail has a responsibility to keep the industry going. Because if we make it dull, if we don't listen to what the customers want, if we don't start merchandising and interpreting how they react in the stores, they'll just start going online or continue going online. There will be nowhere for the manufacturers to launch their products. So it is essential that we look at what people want, how they react, and then lay our stores out and present our merchandise in that way. So that's the first principle. Shopping is a contact sport. The second thing is that it's all about money. And design and floor planning is really only there to deliver the four things on the right-hand side of that chart. So time and again, you've got to come back to those elements and say, look, am I just doing this for fun? And we're as guilty as everyone else. We were putting fish tanks in the ceilings of shops in Red Square for some years. But you've got to stand back and say, well, actually, is that going to deliver one of these objectives? Is it going to increase the customers? Is it going to decrease walkout? Is it going to increase transaction value? And is it going to increase frequency of customers? And if it's not going to deliver any of those things, then it's probably not worth doing. And the things that you can play with to deliver that are obviously the staff, the physical space in the store, the stock, and the services that you introduce. So really, what we do is we just talk about that graph to people and say, okay, can the design that we're offering you deliver those elements? So that's the money. It's a contact sport. It's about money. And the third thing, and probably the most important, Tony touched on this in his talk, is that it's about the customer journey. We do all sorts of research. We do, Joelle would have to remind me, neuro-linguistic something or other. We do qualitative, we do quantitative, we do focus groups, we do video diaries, we do scrapbooking, we do all sorts of stuff to try and get inside the consumer's mind. But actually, what delivers the most value to us, time and time and time again, is accompanied qualitative shopping that starts to look at the experience that the consumer wants to have in the store. So, just have a quick drink. I'm either nervous or guilty. Probably both. So what we do is we start about 50 meters away from the store. We're not in advertising. We can't drive people off their sofas. But what we can do is we can start to walk through with those consumers and say to them, look, outside your store, or outside the store that is the target, what is it that you feel should be happening? You know, does this shop react to your needs and requirements? And if not, what would react to your needs and requirements? So outside the store, we look at it at 50 meters, 10 meters, 5 meters. And then at the window, what do you expect to see there? We did some research outside a mobile phone store in Spain. It was a car phone warehouse store, a phone house as it's called down there. And on the first, I think, week of the research, there was no window display. And then the shop fitters, who weren't us, came and put a window display in halfway through the research. Obviously, like all good researchers, we called them and told them our research was awful and they'd ruined everything for us and how miserable we were. But we continued with it. And what we found was that as consumers passed that store, 5 times more stopped to look in the window once the handset was there. It was like jewelry shopping. Suddenly, there was something for the consumer to interact with. And that single action for Carphone increased customer stops and got somewhere between 10 and 12% more people through the door. So what is it that people expect to see at the window? Then on the threshold, when they stand there, what are they looking for? Clear categorization? Are they looking for a sale? Are they looking for someone to say hello to them? Then inside the store, what's their experience and their expectation? And then staff and service to secure the sale. Often that comes in earlier on the threshold. And only when you've done that qualitative research can you really understand what the brief is for the design. Okay, only when you've done that can you sit down with the design team and say, look, here's the result of what customers want. Now, let's try and do something visual or do something aesthetic that responds to those needs. And then you can judge, if you go through those steps, you can then judge your design on the basis of whether it's good or bad. Simple terms, but is it good, is it bad? And a good design responds to the needs of the consumers. A bad design fails. And so no longer do you have to get into the questions of, do you like the blue or the pink? And suddenly the whole thing starts to become relevant. We've produced some designs for shops that make our head of design, Michael, cry. He looks at them and he says, we can't possibly push that out. But it responds to the consumer need. We put it in store, sales go up. Therefore, it's a successful piece of design. And that's I think, the difference between the pure aesthetics and the need to drive the consumer desires. So the customer journey, which is the basis of the research. So in this one, which is a bank out in Russia, what we tried to do from 50 meters out of Moscow, it's like every high street's like Las Vegas. It's just flashing lights and little small lights, no planning of any sort, and it's about shout. If you ever produce anything subtle out there, nobody comes anywhere near it. So what we're trying to achieve on the left was just a big impact from 50 meters. 10 meters, we wanted to try and make the internal environment a little bit more attractive. People could see what's going on. Russian banks at the moment look a little bit like sex shops. I don't know what a sex shop looks like. I was told. So you can look inside. Then when you come in, what we've done is we've categorized the services as products. So you can approach the product bay. A little bit of an interactive screen. There's a little cafe in the center, and then completely transparent discussion rooms. So we understood what the consumer wanted and then responded to it through the design. And then really the final four things that we look at are really once people get into the store. And there are four things that integrate in the floor planning of a store. The first one is the need to equalize the space. Now, what that's about, it's about getting as much of the shop shopped as you possibly can. And in a special dispensation, coming to Arizona, you will recognize the American spelling of equalize on the top of that one. So I've managed to do something. So this is the Shopworks $1 million slide. And what it tells us, what we do is we track people through stores. Over time, this has become much more sophisticated. We now do it with cameras and heat maps and all that kind of stuff. But the principles remain the same. Green is poor selling space. Red is good selling space because it's hot. Are there any accountants in the room? CFOs, that kind of stuff? No, they're always the first ones to put their hand up and say, no, Craig, red is bad. It's always bad. In this case, red is good because it's hot. And yellow is counter. So what was happening at the start was that, and the store entry is on the right-hand side on the curve. It was a photo processing store. People were just coming in, dropping off their films, only going past that one small piece of retail, and they're doing it twice because they had to collect their films as well. What we did, the only piece of furniture we significantly changed was the counter, and we introduced some central units. But we cut that back to the back. We gave them a central unit to rotate round, and we created a customer journey where the product was exposed to the customers. So Hilary Khan, who's a South African woman who taught me a lot, she calls it exposing products to the danger of being sold. And that's probably quite right. What she said was, look, get it out on the shop floor, get customers past it, and give them a chance of buying it. If the product or the service is not within 1.2 meters of your customers, you can't sell it. Whatever you do, you can't sell it because they haven't seen it. And in photo, at that time, each meter that we converted from poor selling space to good selling space was worth 20,000 euros turnover per year at 60% margin. So the difference between the top plan and the bottom plan was 11 meters at 20,000 euros, which is a lot of euros, which is more dollars than it used to be. Or is it less dollars? So that's why it's the $1 million slide, because it's the single one that nobody ever seems to talk about. It's about interpreting that traffic flow into an effective floor plan. So if that's the first principle, equalize the value of the space, the second principle is direct customers through the space. What we know is that people shop at 60 degrees, which is about like that. That's their arc of shopping vision. Well, it's not quite true. Men shop at 60 degrees. No surprise to anyone, women shop at 75 degrees. They can just take in a little bit more, which is why you see men walking down the street, they're always doing this, or it's tunnel vision, taking in everything. And they only ever really turn at 45 degrees. So if you're expecting people to turn back on themselves or turn into the walls at right angles, they just don't do it. So if the first principle is maximize the value of the space, and the second one is direct them, what you've got to do is use everything that you can to start to get that customer journey taking place. So that's the floor coverings, the lighting, the location of the counter, the location of the security booms, whatever you have will drive customer traffic. So in this example, this was Turkcell down in Turkey. They are the Turkish national operator of the mobile network, with about an 80% market share. They started with this store on the left, Turkcell, and we created a concept design for them, and then we started to get the zoning right. We started to talk to them about, the front of the store needs to attract, then we need to hit the customers in 2 zones and interact, then we need to get them to the back and transact. So it was all about creating that journey. And what we did in the end is we understood from the research that took place is that the real excitement for consumers and all mobile operators hate it when they hear this, the real excitement for consumers is the mobile phone. It's not about the services. It's not about the 3G bits and pieces. The thing that gets people really excited is, what does the latest piece of technology look like? How can you touch it? How do you feel it? And that's what Turkcell had to do. They had to break that thinking that it was all about the service offer. So what we did is we got this handset bar into the center, which highlighted the handsets. People could then come in, they could interact with the handsets, and then all the way around the walls of the store, we put the service offers. So they bounced off the handset bar into the service offers. So the two things started to work in tandem. What we failed to do, well, they're very emotional people, the Turks. They must be the only serious mobile operator in the world who has a slug as their emblem. And there he is. Our first meeting with them, we ran in, we said, look, the slug's got to go. We can't have him. And then we went out and we conducted the research, and what became clear is that there was a huge emotional attachment to Cello the slug. Sorry, Cello, the emblem. And so we made him more prominent. Turkcell had a problem. They were perceived to be high-handed, arrogant, out of touch with their consumers, and several other not very nice things in Turkish. And so, we softened it from the corporate blue to the orange, built up the role of Cello, and really started to help consumers interact. And that whole process took, from appointment to opening that store, 10 weeks. Only in Turkey, I've got to tell you, only in Turkey, they shout and they cry, and eventually it happens. But it was good. And the mobile phone sales in that store and contracts went up 400%. So it was just about getting the products in the hands of the consumers. So that was Turkcell. The third principle, so we've got the first one, equalize the value of the space. The second one is direct customers through it. And the third one is sightlines and access, which is really making sure that from the outside of the store, and as customers go through this journey through the store, they've always got logical access points. Logical points where they can say, okay, they can orient themselves. I understand where I am now. I understand where I need to go. And what happens typically is that staff tend to upset the natural balance of the store. So in this case, this is Hamleys, the toy store on Regent Street. Anybody been to Hamleys? A few people. It's a wonderful store. It's just a huge toy shop. They've got great staff, interactive staff, lots of magicians going on. It's just lovely. Now, this is the ground. Do you call it the ground floor or the first floor? We have a problem, aren't we? It's the bit when you walk off the street. It's the first floor. What's that called? The ground floor. Oh, it's the same. Good. So this is the ground floor, and it's about 3 or 4 stories, Hamleys. The top right of that ground floor was refitted by Steiff, the German teddy bear company. Probably mispronounced that. Steiff? Anyway, teddy bears with buttons in their ears, they go up to about a couple of $1,000, down to about $40. And they did a beautiful, beautiful shop fit back right. And the CEO of Hamleys called us and said, look, Craig, we've got a bit of problem with the Germans. They've invaded Poland. No. The back right of the store isn't working for them. They've put in this really expensive shop fit, and they're not selling any teddy bears. So we commissioned some traffic flow research. I'm slightly ashamed to say that the whole thing came down to one piece of video, which should play any second. So 90% of people come down from the top floors, and they start to come down to escalators in the middle. So they're coming down here, no visibility through the wall, And then one of the store staff has actually placed a floor-standing merchandiser right in the way at the end of the wall. So from that point in the store, there's only one way anybody's ever going to walk, and that's left. So the problem wasn't with the teddy bears. The problem wasn't with the pricing policy. The problem was purely in the fact that nobody ever saw them, because they were all being forced left by that merchandiser. We spoke to the store manager and said, do you understand what's happening? And he said, yes, Craig, but the problem is I'm selling loads of these little fluffy things off this merchandiser, so, which is sometimes the frustration of it. So, a few fluffy things for 25% of the ground floor to be killed. So that's really the sight lines and access. And if you go to Hamleys now, you'll find that they've actually removed that wall and the merchandiser. So much more harmony, and that whole floor is now equalised. So that was Hamleys. This is Phone House in Germany, and quite simple things can start to have an impact. So what we did here for them was we categorised you'll see a better example shortly, but we categorised the zones for them. So bestseller with camera. Not sure what the next one is. And what we started to do is we started to introduce the perpendicular fins. And what we found was that the headers in store don't work without the orientation of the fins. Because by the time consumers retain point of sale very, very poorly. I mean, even in small format stores, we find that only under 2% of people can remember what the promotional message in the window was within 10 seconds of walking in. It's shocking, really. So by the time people have walked across the store, they can't remember which the bestseller category was. So the fins orientate them, and then we start to increase the amount of information and point of sale as people get closer. And they can start to absorb more information. So, and then the final one, categories and adjacencies, is really just about getting the right product next to each other, getting the right space allocated, and getting really into the small scale SKU and category analysis. Now, this is my Ivan the Terrible friend. This is his stores. Sviaznoi 3 we created. But this is not really what caused him the excitement. These stores they're quite high value. He puts the money into the best shopping centres. His other 1,200 stores are fairly miserable. But what we did for them in a piece of category analysis is that we went from the left-hand side to the right. So it's the same shop, same merchandise, same units, and all we did was we categorized the stock. We went through the SKU range. We delisted a lot of stuff. We put in bestseller, we put in top 10, we put in camera, MP3 photo, etc., etc. And the sales results on that were the profit went up 58%. Now, considering he was only spending $600 a store on little bits of categorization and point of sale, that is a tremendous result. And that's what really made him happy. It wasn't a new flagship store on Red Square. It was the fact that across his whole network, he could make fast impacts with very low investment. And in these environments, I think this is what people are really looking for. They're looking to make some changes in store, see some benefit, so that they can start to reinvest into the whole machinery of their network. So, and this was some categorization in a bank in Australia, where what we tried to do is categorize the services as products down the left-hand side of the store. We added these central consultancy areas in the middle to drive people and expose them to the different product ranges in the banks, going from a child's offering all the way through to retirement. So again, looking at products, services as products, and then exposing people to them so that they could interact with them. Now, I'm just going to finish with two very short case studies. They're really, for us, neither of them are a glamorous piece of design, but both of them delivered great value for the retailer. And I think, for us, this is what we're pushing. What we're saying to people at the moment is, look, we must do something. We can't just sit on our hands. We've got to drive change. We've got to make sure the store staff are happy. And, part of all of this is an education process of the store staff so that they understand the impact that they have in store. And big differences can be made. The first one is my friend Axel's shop, Decodrome. So it's homewares. He's only got a handful of shops based in and around Antwerp, and he's got Antwerp, Brussels, Liège, and Tervuren, I think, so in Belgium. So doing reasonably well. But that's where it started. We said, look, if we can look at some simple actions, we think we can get your sales up. So at the end of last year, here's his initial floor plan. So you'd come in, first of all, fabric, then there was a service counter, crockery, garden, glass and candles. And really the customer journey was straight from the door, little circuit to that grey table at the back, and then out again. What we did is we moved the counter up to the front left and then made sure we were driving everybody to the left. So we got people into the fabric section, then round crockery and garden, out through glass and candles, and then back through the service. Now you've got to remember, he fitted this shop overnight. All we added was paint and posters. That was the plan, in fact. So same furniture, same stock, added some posters, categorized the different elements. And that's how it ended up. So not a great picture, but a clear environment to shop. And I think the key to it there is that turnover was up 23%. So same stock, same furniture, just a better environment to shop. So that's the first one. The second one is a slightly bigger retailer, Carrefour, who we did the DVD department with in association with 20th Century Fox. And that's how it looked at the start. So really, again, your customer journey is just going to drive past that promotional display down the central aisle. Nothing inviting to go into the category, nothing inviting to go into the department, no real call to action. So the initial floor plan looked like that. So there you can see the row of promotional items down the left. We changed that round to try and drive people into the department earlier so that they would then shop, shorten the runs to try and get some circulation going. We recategorized it for them. So top level French, new, promotions, I can get that one. Children, TV series, and then other genre. Bon affairs, that's a special category for French presidents. Comes with long-term children that you keep quiet about. So we recategorized it, and then that's what it looked like in the end. So added the fins, added the way that people can shop the category, and we got purchases up 10%. Now, that, in a category that's declining, in a store format that's declining, is a tremendous result. So they were pretty pleased about that. And that, as they say, is it. Thank you. Any questions? No? Perfect. I will leave you just with one last one. This is, so you'll know Selfridges, won't you? The iconic British general store, department store. This is in our local town. There you go. Selfridges. We quite enjoy that. Okay, thank you very much.